Welcome, everyone. This is Debbie Mayberry with National Kitchen and Bath Association. You're here for developing a high-performance team, mobilizing and inspiring your people with Fred Rykowski, who is the principal of Legacy Business Leaders. Fred is here with us now, so we are getting ready to get started. And Fred, if you're there, we're ready to go. Thank you so much.
Okay, Debbie, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity as usual, and thanks to the NKBA for presenting this value-added benefit of your membership. And of course, thanks to all of you that have joined us today for this webinar, Developing a High-Performance Team. I appreciate so much that you've invested your limited time. And my goal, as always, is to make sure that this time makes a tangible difference for you. So today we're going to look at the principles and the practices of developing a high performance team, and especially the part about mobilizing and inspiring your people. This is no small issue. It is a huge industry issue. It's always been a big thing, a big challenge in our industry, but right now with the labor shortage, of course, that adds a layer of complexity that most of us are experiencing in a negative way, one way or another. I talk to builders around the country every day, and remodelers, kitchen and bath experts, designers, and so forth, and it's an epidemic. It just is what it is, though, and it's really important, imperative, though, for all of you leaders to consider the fact that even though there are extenuating circumstances, the problem isn't out there. At the end of the day, it's going to be the leaders who come up with the most creative solutions that win this battle and this war. So it's up to you. It all comes down to your mindset, your perspective of what's going on. And I say it this way, the first step to any change is awareness. And for all of us leaders, we have to become more and more aware of what's going on around us and the pieces that we have to put into play that we can leverage in order to solve these kind of complex problems. It's not going to get any easier either. From my perspective, the conversations that I have, the things that I hear and read, this issue is going to be with us for a while. So if we're going to win this battle, it's imperative that we create companies that attract great people. And once we get them, it's going to take a monumental effort to keep them. So I want to do a quick poll before we go any further so I can make sure that I'm approaching this from the correct context. I'm asking you this question. Please click on yes or no. Do you self-perform field labor? That simply means, do you have W-2 employees that perform the majority of your labor in the field? And now that's aside from the trades, HVAC, plumbing, electrical. Do you self-perform labor? If you could fill that out right now, just click yes or no. We'd appreciate it. So again, that can give me a little better idea of the context to put this in for today's session. So I'm going to keep right on going, but we'll leave this this question right up on the screen for about another 60 seconds here for you to answer, and then we'll compile the totals. All right, so where do we go from here? Well, the idea of mobilizing a team, developing a high performance team, comes in a lot of different aspects. Of course, hiring, recruiting, those are all important. We're going to spend a little bit of time on that today, but in a 1 hour session, we can't really get that deep into it. And so the perspective we're going to take today's session is going to be, once you have the right people on board, who are they? How do you know they're the right people? And then how do you motivate them? How do you give them a place to work that they look forward to coming to? And so the great people that you find and hire stay mobilized and devoted and committed to the cause. That's no small task, but it takes being intentional. And that's a real key word for today's session. Leadership doesn't happen accidentally. It happens on purpose. So that means that even though we're busy, and I know we all are, that's no excuse for not leading well. And I put it this way, leadership cannot be subordinated to busyness, period. There's no excuse. We cannot allow that to happen as leaders and owners. We have to prioritize our leadership role, even if it's just for 5 to 10% of our time each week. It really doesn't matter. The point is that if we lead well, we will find ourselves with organizations that have sustainable profitability long term. And that's important. That's a corollary that's irrefutable. It's all about leadership. It's about you and the decisions you make and the skills you have to lead well. And the good news is that leadership is an art. It's a learned skill. regardless of your personality style, your upbringing, the conditioning you've had and life experiences, doesn't matter. You can learn to be a great leader by just adopting some simple skills, becoming more and more aware of how those skills impact every single thing you do every single day, and so forth. So, okay, so we've got our poll is in. 39% have said yes, 11% have said no. That's great. That gives me a lot of information, so I'm going to erase the screen here and move on. Now, to challenge you today, I want you to think about how you go about your day and how much that day involves really intentionally leading your organization to where it needs to go. So to do that, I'm going to illustrate it with what I call the zone of creative tension. This is really important for all of you from the aspect of how well do you lead? Do you lead on purpose? Is it really intentional? Now, the zone of creative tension, to put it into context, starts with the no tension comfort zone at the bottom. We like that zone. I know it. I like it too, by the way. And for a long time, I really fought hard to stay there in my business. But over the years, especially the early years in my business, it became really, really obvious that I wasn't going to get anywhere. I wasn't going to find any lasting change until I approached this whole thing differently. The zone of creative tension is simply a zone that we all get into where we're uncomfortable. In fact, sometimes it can even be miserable. That's okay. But please keep this in mind. Unless we learn how to jump into that zone and approach it the right way, we're not going to see the lasting kind of change we need with people. But most of us get in here and we battle and we fight, and then we end up turning around and lowering our goals or whatever we have to do to get comfortable again. But I want to tell you that unless and until you figure out how to deal with issues in this zone of creative tension well, you'll never probably find that lasting change you want. And this zone of creative tension is where we find new answers to old problems. That's important. We find new solutions to old problems. The minute we allow ourselves, force yourself, encourage yourself, whatever it takes to get in that zone and stay the course and fight the battle in the way that will produce some very productive results for you long term. That's really kind of the overview of what we're doing here today. And for all of us leaders, we have to learn how to reject institutional mediocrity, and that's a huge issue with all of us. But think of it this way: we're in this thing. It's kind of like an orchestra. It's like assembling all the pieces and parts so they're in tune and they collaborate beautifully and make great music. That's what leadership's really all about. So we have to develop a real contempt for mediocrity. And honestly, it takes a real mind shift to get into the zone of creative tension and fight the battles. It takes something really, really important, and that's leadership perseverance. So I want to talk to you about two things as far as leadership goes that are really important for all of us to understand. First and foremost, if we're going to see change in this whole issue of mobilizing a great team, we have to understand what our top two responsibilities are. Whether you're a leader, an owner, or all the above, it doesn't matter. If you're in a key leadership management role, part owner, full owner, this is key for all of us because this is the truth about leadership responsibilities. The first one and the most important one is profit protection. We do some seminars and webinars on the 5 strategies for profit protection. It's job number 1 for you. If you're not protecting and producing great profit, it's really hard to do anything else. If you're chasing money all day long and can't understand why you can't get the bills paid and being frustrated, it's just precludes you from doing much of anything else in a productive way. But the second piece of this, and it's very close second, but it is second, and that's people development, and that's where we're landing here today. The people development piece is difficult, and it takes some real perseverance for leaders to figure out how to develop people. But the very first step, though, is to figure out that we must do it. It's absolutely a mandate. And when you think about it, business success is always a function of great people. Unless you're a solopreneur, a one-person company, and I'm certain that you're on this seminar, on this webinar today because you're not, you have multiple people in your organization. People development is not a suggestion, it's a mandate for you, leaders. You cannot subordinate the importance of that to anything else other than profit protection. If you're not producing profit, though, it's really hard to develop a great team. So key today is thinking about some of the ideas that we typically default to in this whole process. And one of them that I find frequently is that we tend to conspire to people's low expectations. It doesn't work. So if you haven't developed a really sound core four for your business, then I would suggest you start there. And the core four is simple. It takes some time to wrestle with it, but honestly, it produces some great results and gives you a great reference point to lead from, especially in times of crisis and conflict. The core four is simple. It's first of all your core values, and that answers the question, what do you stand for? What do we stand for as a team? The second one is vision. That means, where are we going? It answers the question for you and your team very clearly. Where are we going as a team? It's like painting a big target on the wall with a bullseye in the middle and stating that our limited resources are going to be invested right there to hit that bullseye in the middle of that target. The third piece is the missions. The mission answers the question, if we're going somewhere, why are we going there? What's our real purpose? What's underlying what we do here every day? Is it to create great and beautiful projects with satisfied customers who refer us to friends, neighbors, and family? Or is it more than that? It's to impact our community in a positive way, but it has to be something. There is something there for you. And then the fourth piece is, what does winning look like? That's goals. So it's values, core values, vision, mission, and goals. And honestly, I ask that question a lot of staffs around the country. What does winning look like around here? And it's really a shame, but the answer I get back is mostly silence. Team seriously. That means we're going to make an absolute serious commitment to recruiting, to hiring right, and to training people right. And there's more to that too that's going to take, but we'll get into that in just a minute. And what that really means is it's going to be imperative for you as a company, as an organization, to become the company of choice. That means you have to develop a competitive advantage. And usually we think of competitive advantages as being something that's more appropriate when we talk about sales. Well, listen, employees are your customers too. When you think about it, the definition of a customer is really just anybody that you have to please in order to succeed. That's it. That's what a customer is. So that includes your employees, perhaps your subs, your vendors, not to mention your end users. So there's a lot of people out there that you have to pay attention to, and that means a competitive advantage can be equally as effective with hiring and employee keeping new employees as it is to find new customers. So competitive advantage sets you apart. It gives people a real reason to believe in you. So it's something that Doug Hall says in his great books, Jumpstart Your Business Brain. We have to give people a real reason to believe in us. And when you do that well, you're going to find that you're bringing more and more potential employees into the fold. They're going to be hearing about you, and not only through your customers, but through your employees as well. So competitive advantage is becoming the company of choice. Question for you, and this is to test your thought process in this, and that is, how many of you treat your employees just like you do your customers? That's not a trick question. It's really an important one though. And it's something to ponder, because if you're not treating your employees just like you would as well, or equally, or it's better even than you treat your customers, then probably chances are you're never going to have a fully mobilized team of devoted followers. Let's talk about the learning points for today. A couple things we're going to look at here. First of all is how to assess your cultural health. How do you do that? What is the cultural health of your business right now? Is it really that kind of culture that will attract and keep great people? The next one we're going to look at is creating a culture of accountability. And almost every single business owner and leader that I talk to will tell me when I ask them what is their biggest challenge, the one thing or one of the two or three things that are most important to them, it's absolutely this issue of creating a culture where people are accountable. And then finally, if we have enough time, we're going to talk about some compensation strategies that will create ownership thinking for your people. And that's really important. Once you get people engaged on that level where they start thinking like owners, taking ownership, it's a different ball game, and it changes everything. By the way, what happened there? But Jim Collins says it beautifully, that people are not your most important asset, but the right people are. And I started to say when I was cut off is that most of you or many of you have experienced this, and some maybe right now, that we tend to keep the wrong people on board way too long. We tend to keep marginal people or underperforming people on way too long. And honestly, that's just called being held hostage. There's no reason for that. If we begin to take this issue of developing a high performance team seriously, that means we're going to make an absolute serious commitment to recruiting, to hiring right, and to training people right. And there's more to that too that's going to take, but we'll get into that in just a minute. And what that really means is it's going to be imperative for you as a company, as an organization, to become the company of choice. That means you have to develop a competitive advantage. And usually we think of competitive advantages as being something that's more appropriate when we talk about sales. Well, listen, uh, employees are your customers too. When you think about it, the definition of a customer is really just anybody that you have to please in order to succeed. That's it. That's what a customer is. So that includes your employees, perhaps your subs, your vendors, not to mention your end users. So there's a lot of people out there that you have to pay attention to, and that means a competitive advantage can be equally as effective with hiring and employee uh, keeping new employees as it is to find new customers. So competitive advantage sets you apart. It gives people a real reason to believe in you. So it's something that Doug Hall says in his great books, Jumpstart Your Business Brain. We have to give people a real reason to believe in us. And when you do that well, you're going to find that you're bringing more and more potential employees into the fold. They're going to be hearing about you, and not only through your customers, but through your employees as well. So competitive advantage is becoming the company of choice. Question for you, and this is to test your thought process in this, and that is, how many of you treat your employees just like you do your customers? That's not a trick question. It's really an important one, though. And it's something to ponder, because if you're not treating your employees just like you would as well, or equally, or it's better even than you treat your customers, then probably chances are you're never going to have a fully mobilized team of devoted followers. Let's talk about the learning points for today. A couple things we're going to look at here. First of all is how to assess your cultural health. How do you do that? What is the cultural health of your business right now? Is it really that kind of culture that will attract and keep great people? The next one we're going to look at is creating a culture of accountability. And almost every single business owner and leader that I talk to will tell me when I ask them what is their biggest challenge, the one thing or one of the two or three things that are most important to them, it's absolutely this issue of creating a culture where people are accountable. And finally, if we have enough time, we're going to talk about some compensation strategies that will create ownership thinking for your people. And that's really important. Once you get people engaged on that level where they start thinking like owners, taking ownership, it's a different ball game, and it changes everything. By the way, a quick side note for everyone on the call today. Any of the templates or documents that I mention here today, you are most welcome to them. Just email me and I'll make sure you get them. No problem, but just please know that up front. I don't want you to go away with unanswered questions. And it also reminds me that at the end of the session, any time that we have, we'll allow some questions to be answered there as well. All right, let's keep going. Let's talk about the first one, assessing the cultural health of your company. What is culture? Well, when you think about it, the important thing is that culture is really the sum total of your organization's beliefs, behaviors, and values, and that culture's ability to withstand conflict. That's really important. Most of us, when we think of the idea of growth, how do we grow a business? We tend to automatically be thinking about more revenue, more sales, and a few of you think more profit, but most of us think in terms of revenue and sales. Well, revenue, sales, and profit are great, but honestly, they're only byproducts of growth. And what growth is in reality is the organization's ability to solve more and more complex problems. That's it. That means that we have to look inwardly and try to figure out how can we mobilize people to solve problems on their own, right? That's really what it boils down to. That's how you have to approach this idea of business growth. If you really want to grow, grow your people. Teach them how to solve problems on their own. I spoke with a builder just today, as a matter of fact, who was complaining about a project manager who is really slow and really unmotivated to get out there and solve problems. And he described the situations to me where the project manager was coming to him with problems to solve and questions that he asked over and over. And the owner was describing how he answers all these questions and he's really frustrated by this. And I said, listen, are you really leading this person, or are you just making this person codependent upon you? Now think about that. If you really want to grow a team of people, stop solving their problems for them. Seriously. You have to be asking questions like, listen, I'm confident in you. I hired you because you're capable. I really believe in you. Those are powerful words, but the final part of that statement needs to be, what are your two best solutions for this problem? Help people to solve their own problems. And honestly, you're right. That's just called micromanaging, and it doesn't work if you want a team of mobilized problem solvers. The second thing I want to show you here is a quote from Craig Groeschel. It's one of my favorites. He talks about it this way: your culture is a combination of what you create and what you allow. Wow. Now, hopefully that hits home with all of you, because by and large, most of us allow stuff because we're fearful of losing people. We allow stuff that should never, ever be allowed. And here's what happens. If your organization's beliefs, behaviors, and values really describe your culture, define your culture, here's what happens. When you start allowing a lot of stuff that's counterproductive, all you do is just lower the standard for your company. Everybody starts to believe that this is the new standard, the new acceptable standard around here right now. And honestly, all it does is become counterproductive for everybody. That's what happens when we allow the wrong people to stay on board way too long. I spoke with a remodeler earlier this week. It was an interesting discussion, same way as the other one, and by and large. But the issue there was when I asked them what their biggest challenge was right now, it was simply, well, we can't get 40 hours out of anybody any given week. It seems like somebody's always off for something. They call in at the last minute. They take out for this. Their kids are sick. And you know the story. You've heard all the excuses, and that's what they were. They were all excuses. Well, a very short conversation, like a minute, minute and a half, they were able to, the owners that were on the call were able to define the answer to my question, which was, what's the problem here? Whose fault is this? And they were quick to stop, and there was a moment of silence, and I'm sure they weren't praying, but I can tell you for sure that they were thinking a lot, and the answer they came up was the right one, and that is, the problem's us. We've allowed the standard in this company to slide down to a level, really not really even recognizing what we were doing, that is now the new standard. Well, we put a couple of strategies into place on that call that were powerful for them. And I can guarantee you that with those strategies in place, they are going to change the game. And that's how sensitive culture is. It happens with you leaders. Listen, culture can be impacted by simply the way that the facial expressions you make, the language that you use, the body language that you use, your posture, all of the above. All of those little things impact the people around you. Believe me, your sphere of influence is probably way bigger than most of you think. And with some little tweaks, a new level of awareness, and how you can change your behaviors in any given situation can have a tremendous impact on the culture of your company. And what happens is you're building a bridge of trust along the way that will withstand the weight of conflict later on. I asked an operations manager this week a question too. It was context where he was talking about this issue of people, and it was really interesting because in his situation, he's a manager and he has impact. And the whole idea of his question was, well, how do I get these people to do what I want them to do? And we came back around full circle to the same thing: change the standard. You may be unintentionally allowing the standards to slip down that slope where you end up at a place where you're experiencing a lot of counterproductivity and maybe even conflict. So it happens with you. Business growth is a result of an organization's ability to solve more and more complex problems. All right, let's talk about the 5 irrefutable truths of your culture. Okay, Number one, leaders shape the culture. We just talked about that. It's up to you. The culture you have in your company, whether it's productive, counterproductive, or even toxic, that's your fault, leaders. And please don't take that the wrong way. It can't be any other way. Leaders call the shots. Leaders pave the way. The culture is in your hands. And after today, hopefully you'll have some action steps in mind that you can take today. And that's what I want to provide for you, that you can make a difference in the culture right now. The second irrefutable truth of your culture is that time erodes the awareness of your culture. That's what I just mentioned a minute ago. Sometimes we can unintentionally let the standards in our companies drop down, slide down the slope, where soon enough they end up becoming very, very stressful and very frustrating for everyone. And honestly, if you're asking that question right now, why can't I get my people to do what I want them to do? It's the wrong question. The right question is, how can I get my people to want to do what I want them to do? And that takes some real steadfast leadership that we'll touch on in just a few minutes. All right, time in a culture erodes awareness of it. The third one, and this is really important, that a healthy culture attracts healthy people. You know, one of our biggest advocates in recruiting new people, and this is important to remember, is our people. And if you have an unhealthy culture, listen, nobody's going to be advocating, hey, come here to work. It's a great place. Nobody. But in reality, those people, those W-2 employees that you have, and even your 1099s, they should be your biggest advocates out there. And if you aren't paying them some kind of a commission to bring you people that you hire and keep a minimum of 90 days, think about that, because it's probably one of your least expensive and most powerful recruiting tools. But it works. But first and foremost, got to have a healthy culture, and healthy cultures attract healthy people. It's an ongoing cycle. The corollary of that's true as well. Unhealthy cultures turn healthy people away in a hurry. All right, let's go to the fourth irrefutable truth about your culture. Your culture directly impacts your productivity. I want you to think about this with me just for a moment. When you take on your leadership role seriously and you begin to understand the fact that when you impact your culture, and remember, it happens just in a moment's time, you can impact your culture in an extremely powerful way by simply spinning the words you're saying into a different context or a different tone of voice. You instantaneously impact your productivity. And listen, leaders, this is important because it's true. Every single instance of impacting your culture in a positive way pushes dollars to the bottom line. That's a fact. You may not be able to quantify that immediately, but I can tell you for certain over time, it will make a difference on your bottom line. No doubt about it. The leader I mentioned a minute ago, the operations manager, was telling me how he 3 years ago used to be a real command and control guy, and the way he got things done, okay, I hollered at him. That's what he said, literally. I hollered at him. But he said, over the last 3 years, I've really learned that in order to influence my people and impact them in a positive way, I have to I have to be a collaborator with them. I have to be a support member. I have to be an encourager. I have to be that person that they believe in. And he's absolutely changed his whole leadership role and had some tremendous impact in that company. Let's go to number 5, irrefutable truth. Unhealthy cultures are slow to change. That's so important. And if you have an unhealthy culture, for example, you might start having team meetings, which are essential to your growth and your culture, where people are sitting back with their arms folded. Okay, you've got some symptoms right there of an unhealthy culture. But the beauty of it is you can change it. And the mandate is that you must change it. If you want to break a cycle of dysfunction and become the kitchen bath dealer, designer of choice, remodeler of choice, you got to learn how to break the cycles instead of recycling the old problems that tend to linger on and on and on. And listen, if you got somebody on your team right now that you know is fitting this description of an underperformer or a bad attitude, I can say this to you, get rid of them. Seriously, make it happen quick. Now, there's another side to that coin. You've got to be recruiting constantly. That's in this world today. It's a changed world. In order to solve this problem, that means that we have to be recruiting on an ongoing basis. We have to be putting people on the back burner. We have to have a reserve of go-to people that we can bring back in and re-interview and hire in a fairly short amount of time. But there's another side to that too that we're going to go into again as well. But let's take a look at what dysfunction looks like. It's important to understand it. I know you're experiencing some of it. We all do. But these are some signs of an unhealthy culture. The first one is gossip. It's out there. Stop it. Dave Ramsey and his organization that does financial peace, they talk about this whole idea of gossip, and for them, it's a no-go, and they make it part of their employee handbook, and they make sure every new employee understands straight up that gossip will not be tolerated, not even once. And they go to the extent, it's just this important to them, they go to the extent that if gossip is experienced one time, you are walked out to the car and it's over. There's no tolerance for it. You shouldn't tolerate it either. Second one is politics. The third one is entitlement. This is a big one in the culture we live in today. The entitlement mentality is really becoming more and more entrenched in our culture. But remember, even though our businesses are kind of a microcosm of the culture we live in the United States and beyond, in all honesty, we have to remember that even though our country is a democracy, our business isn't. We need to operate our businesses with democratic principles, but it's not a democracy. We have standards, and we're going to hold to them. And you're entitled to what you earn, and we're going to help you show us what you know so that we can then compensate you accordingly. And more, I hear builders talk about this issue of people coming in and asking for exorbitant amounts of money because, quote unquote, we have experience. Sorry, that's not good enough. But to get a really high performing team, sure, bring that person in. You want 70K? I'll tell you what, I'll start you at 50. We're going to put the 30, 60, 90-day metrics in place for you. Please sign here. We'll have an evaluation for you at 30 and 60 and 90. And then at 90, if you do as agreed, you achieve all the metrics that you say you're really good at, we're going to talk about a raise to X amount. Now, from there, we're going to do 180-day metrics, but you get the picture. Help people to prove that they're worth what they want and show you that they can do what they want, because more often than not, in fact, the large majority of the time, you know what happens. You get them in there, they start, and they don't know anything, at least not near as much as they say they did. And it causes a bunch of confusion and chaos because now you're paying someone more than your other people who supposedly knows way more, and you know the story, fill in the blanks. It never ends well, unfortunately. Have them prove themselves. Don't let anybody come in with any kind of entitlement mentality. The fourth one is low morale. That's easy to spot. You just watch people, like I mentioned earlier, in your company meeting, sitting back, arms folded, texting, looking at the floor, whatever, or not answering you directly. Not making eye contact, et cetera, et cetera. You know all the signs. Watch for them, but that's a sign of an unhealthy culture. Fifth one is self-evident. That's high turnover. If you get your top A players fleeing, check it out. There's something wrong with the culture, folks. You've got to make it good. You've got to make it right. It has to be inviting. If you want A players on your team, you have to have an A culture. And it doesn't take much to get there, but it's going to take some real intentional leadership. I can tell you that. All right. The next one goes fairly closely with number 4, indifference. So it's where people just tell you, give you a lot of lip service, but really don't give you any buy-in. They'll show up for their paycheck. They'll do the job by and large. They won't do any extra. They won't offer anything. They won't offer to solve any complex problems or be proactive or anything else. It's just, here I am, I want my paycheck. And finally, the seventh one is average or below average productivity. This is really important. When you see consistent average productivity, in my book, that's an unhealthy culture. Because in a healthy culture, A players and even B players are out there making stuff happen. They want to succeed. They want to excel. They want to see the organization win. And typically, you're going to see that those folks are going to be well above average in their productivity. That's the team you want. So right now, I want you to just mentally think about this based on what you've seen these last couple screens. Rank your own culture. Where are you in this whole scheme of things? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being excellent, what do you see? What do you see in your culture? It's important for you to grade yourself right now because wherever you are, it really doesn't matter. Uh, some of you have nowhere to go but up. That's okay too. The point is, know where you are right now and start the ascent to a great culture, because until you do, chances are that anything else you do to produce a great team is going to fall by the wayside and be wasted effort. So, and money, by the way, too. And consider this too. It's really important to consider that, most companies that go out of business have plenty of intelligent people. So when you think about hiring people, it's not about so much about competence, although that's important. It's important to understand that a project manager, an office manager, a designer, anybody, they have to have competence and skill in what they do. And you can figure that out really easily with a skills test. That's not a big issue. I have a couple of skill test templates if you want them, let me know, for different positions. But the hard part is figuring out the two most important criteria for hiring. Number one is character, and number two is attitude. Bar none, those are your two most important criteria for hiring anybody and keeping them, by the way. Character and attitude, because listen, if you have someone that has a reasonable amount of competence, that is job knowledge and skill, but they have a great attitude and great character, you can train them all day long. Those folks will dive in and go after stuff with a vengeance, and they'll be devoted as long as you're leading them and they can trust you. That's important. If they can't trust you, that's a different discussion. But as long as they can trust you, they will follow you up the hill and they will learn. As long as you train them. That's important. Patrick Lencioni says it this way, that organizational health will surpass any other discipline as the greatest opportunity for improvement and competitive advantage. In organizational health, when he says that, and by the way, that's in his book called The Advantage. If you haven't read it, please do. It's a tremendous read, and it's exactly relevant to what we're talking about today in this webinar. Organizational health just means cultural health. Same thing, interchangeable. It will surpass any other discipline as the greatest opportunity for improvement and competitive advantage. Anybody not want that in your companies today? Anybody not want improvement and competitive advantage? I know that's why you're on the webinar today, and I appreciate that again, that you're spending the time. So let's take a look at how do you, going into point number two, how do you foster a culture of accountability? It's really important to understand there's some key steps that you can take to do that. And let's talk about what accountability is first and foremost. And this is important because most of us ask the question, why can't I get anybody to be accountable? Important question. But think about it this way, accountability must be chosen. It's not unlike the fact that anybody, for you to lead anybody, that is, they have to choose for you to be their leader. They have to give permission for you to lead them. I hope that makes sense to all of you. Nobody can be led by force. All you'll get is compliance if you think that's what you're doing. You will only get to compliance. Compliance isn't good enough. And honestly, too many companies end up at the level of, here's what compliance is. It's, I'm going to show up. I'm going to work the hours you ask me to, mostly. If I need to take off, I will, or whatever. There's really little commitment. And I'm here for my paycheck. Every Friday, I want to make sure I get my paycheck. I'm compliant. But listen, if you don't get up to cooperation, collaboration, and so forth, if you don't get your people up to those levels, you'll never be anything more than average, or maybe even just be mediocre as an organization. And let's face it, in today's world, mediocre doesn't cut it. Ask your customers. And I'm sure you'll get the answer right away. Hey, we're mediocre. Would you like to hire us? How's that for a byline on your email signature? I don't think it works, and it doesn't, but accountability must be chosen. So you leaders have to foster the environment where people will choose to be accountable. People don't resist change. This is important. They don't resist change. What they do resist is being changed. So it's really, really key for you to understand this principle that accountability must be chosen. So where do we go from here? How do we do that? Well, there's some fundamentals in this whole thing that will help you get where you need to go with this. And let's just go through them quickly. I don't have them on the screen, but I just want to explain some things. This is a place where it'd be a good idea for you to take some notes right now, because I'm going to talk about some fundamentals for you to create that environment where people will willingly choose to take ownership. That is, be accountable. And really, when you think about it, that's what accountability is. It's taking ownership. Here's a few of them. Fair wages and benefits package, really key. If you're trying to be cheap, forget it. Please don't. Figure out how to do a break even on the projected wages for that position, and it'll change your life and it'll change your company. And if you need a break even sheet on any of that stuff, let me know. Email me, I'll send it to you. Today's world, it's important to think about having a PTO package. That is a paid time off. It's a tremendous benefit. People love it. And all you're doing is packaging all their time off, whether it be vacation, holidays, personal days, all those days packaged into one nice, neat package that you, Mr. or Miss Employee, can choose to use as you wish. Really important. You use them as you wish. As long as you give us the appropriate notice, and that's in our employee handbook, use them as you wish. And I'm an advocate of even allowing some of them to be carried over to the following year. Let's face it, people have great things in life they want to do, and some people have never had a 2-week vacation in their whole life. And for you to be able to offer that kind of stuff is huge. The next one is give people a voice. Statistics have shown that employees find it much, much more valuable and important to them to simply have a voice, not a vote. There's a big difference. A voice simply means we're going to have regular scheduled staff meetings. We're going to solve problems together. I want to ask you what needs to change. What do we need to do differently? How can we get better? What would our customers say we need to change? There's a great question to ask your staff. But give them a voice. Regularly scheduled staff meetings at least once a month. I say more, that's up to you, but give them a voice. Help them to solve the problems. You know, most employees unfortunately see themselves as part of the problem instead of part of the solution. Change the game and you'll change the environment. Next one, provide training. It's the common denominator of all successful companies. Most don't train them. And most of you, some of you would say, well, you know, we've tried that, we've trained our people and they just turn around and leave. Well, here's a couple of principles. What if you don't train them and they stay? All right, how about that? But the other side of that coin is if they're leaving, then it has to do something with your culture, almost without doubt. Here's another couple of things, fundamentals to create that culture of accountability. Create results-oriented job descriptions, not task lists. Give people clearly the picture of results that you need them to produce and then support them. Set the standards with consequences. The next one would be win-win employment agreements, focusing on results with clear parameters. The next one I mentioned a few minutes ago, 30, 60, 90-day metrics. It's a tremendously powerful tool. It's like a roadmap to success and productivity. It helps your people become more and more productive more quickly. If you need 30, 60 day, 90 metrics templates for any of your positions, email me. I'll make sure you get them. Just change them to make sure that they fit your company and your values and your vision. But it's easy to do. Draw a roadmap to success. Makes sense, doesn't it? But most of us onboard people, and here's what we do. We don't do it intentionally, but here's what we do. Hey, come on in. I'm going to have you ride with me for today, and tomorrow you're on your own. Go get them. You said you could do it. I can't wait to see you work. But honestly, it's like putting someone into free fall and allowing them to fail. You need to allow them to fail, but not until you've trained them. All right? Good. So again, you can pop in any questions that you'd like into the chat window too. And anything that pops up there, I will be watching for it. And if I can answer them right away, I will. If not, we'll wait to the end. And again, if you have any questions afterwards, just email me on those as well. We'll make sure you get your answers. All right, let's dive in. This is important. I don't want to run out of time, but I want you to understand the three main drivers of organizational health. This means organizational health is really a culture of accountability. How do we do that? The first one is creating trust. And trust gets created by you believing, learning, choosing to believe the best about people. I heard that from a leader years ago in a training session, and he said, you know, in our organization, one of our core values is stubbornly believing the best about people. Wow, that blew me away that day. It changed me forever. because I was really cognizant at that point about how judgmental I could be about people, and it was so counterproductive with our own people and our own organization. And I had to choose. I had to really work hard at being disciplined about believing the best about them. And if you've got somebody in your organization that you can't trust, then you should probably just get rid of them. In reality, it doesn't work. You know, leadership only exists if people follow when they have the freedom not to. Jim Collins said that. That goes back to trust. If they're going to choose to follow you, they have to trust you first. Craig Groeschel again says it this way: if you delegate tasks, you'll raise up doers. But if you delegate authority, you'll raise up leaders. And what does that have to do with trust? Well, most of us love to micromanage and have our hands all over stuff. But if you delegate authority leaders, listen, that's the only way you're going to build up leaders in your organization who will make key decisions on your behalf, great decisions on your behalf. Between that and your core values, my gosh, I mean, the criteria for decision making changes in the moment. You've given them the tools to go out there and make decisions without you. All right, let's go to the second driver of organizational health, and that is unconditional respect. There's two main characteristics for leaders must possess, and this is the first one. It goes hand in hand with trust. If you can't respect someone, honestly, you'll never trust them, and you only get in return what you give away, and you'll never get trust in return. Unconditional respect is huge. And again, if you can't respect someone for some reason, chances are they're the wrong person on your team. Replace them. But make sure it's not just your own personal prejudice that's clouding the issue. All right? Respect people. That's the basic fundamental need for every human being. They just want to know they're respected. And if you can do that first, you can move on to the second one. And this one is huge, and it's steadfast resolve. And what I mean by that is the ability and the willingness to make tough decisions, to confront dysfunction when it's happening right in the moment, and make sure that whatever it is you stand for, you will not compromise it, and that you will absolutely confront it in the moment, and there will be no exceptions to the rule. If something's off track, someone is off the rails, we're going to have a discussion, and there will be some consequences. I read a story not long ago about the leader of a medical facility in North Dakota, I think somewhere up around there. It was an interesting story, a successful organization. This leader was highly respected by his people and loved by his people. It's one of those leaders that was just extremely affable and trustworthy, and people would follow him up a hill. But that's the unconditional respect part. He had built a trust bridge with them. He could withstand the weight of conflict. Tremendous individually, highly respected, not just among his people, but his peers in his industry. But he had a sign on his wall. He may still have it there for all I know, but he had a sign on his wall in his office, and here's what it said: "The first kill awakens the whole herd." Now think about that. What he's describing right there in that sign is steadfast resolve. And leaders, this is one of the hardest disciplines to work on and produce in our organizations. It's one of the single biggest missing components in any organization that I've worked with, including my own at one time too. But I had to learn that when there was something that needed to be addressed, I would address it. And to do that, I had to have clarity with everybody about what the standards were in our organization. That is employee handbook, subcontractor agreements, job results-oriented job descriptions, and so forth, and our core values. And those are the kind of things that set the tone for you to be able to discreetly but directly address misbehavior, poor performance, whatever it may be in your organization, and do it quickly. That's the key. Don't wait. If you see something happening with your people, you have to stop and address it immediately. And when you do, you'll find that people respect you for it, especially good people, especially when they see you addressing underperformance in other employees when they're hitting home runs, and it makes all the difference in your organization. So a leader's most important attribute, again, just to correlate with all of this, is your willingness to lose people. That means we cannot allow ourselves to be held hostage by other people's low expectations. We need to be able and ready to step in the gap and to address these issues when they happen and do it quickly. And for those of you that do not have a disciplinary procedure, please think about putting one into play. You really need to have it, and your people need to sign it. And when you do present it to them, please make sure that you don't hold it over their head as a threat. That's not what it's about. It has to be presented in the context of, quote unquote, the best interest for all of us in our organization to maintain order. Everybody hear that? In the best interest for all of you and our organization to maintain order. And that's what a disciplinary procedure is. And please have your first written warning, second written warning, and termination documents in order and ready to use and use them. And you know, one of the beautiful things about this is whether it's a verbal warning, which you will put in the employee's personnel file, or it's their first written warning, the key thing is to make people understand the fact that you don't want to do this for anybody. You don't want to have to do a written warning for them. And you remember this too, leaders, it's important because you have the discretion to go back and remove that warning. If you find someone after you've put them on, say, a 30-day personal improvement plan, and you found someone really stepping up to the plate and taking ownership of their job and really producing great results and improving, it's really imperative for you to go back to that employee and be able to say at your discretion, you know what, Joe, I love what you're doing here. And I want you to know that I'm going to take that written warning out of your personnel folder. I'm going to throw it away. That's how highly I think of the performance you've given here and the work that you've done and how much I believe in you too. Don't forget to add that part. It's important though, but that's the difference. The contrasting pieces between unconditional respect and steadfast resolve. It's fairly easy to give unconditional respect for most of us, but we have to do it. But the steadfast resolve part is the part where most of us stop short. And without it, basically think about it, we're doomed to mediocrity. That's it. All you'll get is a bunch of sanctioned incompetence on your team. People will keep repeating and recycling the old problems over and over. Why? Because remember, the standard was lower because the leader wouldn't step in the gap and address these issues. Please don't let that happen in your organization. Here's some language for steadfast resolve. A lot of us struggle with the right language. I'm going to just go through these quickly for the sake of time. Here's one. This is one I use frequently, and it was really a wake-up call for an employee that was underperforming or just generally not getting it right. Bring them in and say something like this to them. Hey, you know, Thomas, I really believe in you and I really like you, but there's some things going on that really have me concerned. And I need to know this, Thomas. I need to know if you're going to be on this team or you're going to be off of it, because right now it seems like you're off of it. Now, I watch people across the table from me just sit back and sit up straight all of a sudden because all of a sudden I had their attention. They had no idea I was going to come in there and give them what they perceive as an ultimatum. And it isn't, more or less. You're going to be on the team, you're going to be off. It's your choice. You make the choice. But right now, there's got to be some serious improvement or we're not going to be tolerating this anymore. The second one I like is invite them to take ownership. If you find you're trying to implement a new process or system that you've documented, and it's not happening, ask them something like this. Tell me, you know, this isn't working. We know we need it. It's important to the organization. Why won't this work for you? What do you need to do to make this work for you? Now, I hope you listen carefully because the key words are what do you need to do to make this work for you? We're not saying we're going to do away with the system. We're saying, how can you change this? Maybe you see a way that this would work better if we just repositioned it a little bit or reworded it a little bit, and it gets great results. A third example is one that Stephen Sample, the former president of University of Southern Cal, used to use, and I really like this one. I've used a version of this myself, but I'll quote what he says. When he has an underperforming leader on his staff, James, he would say something like that. I'd really like you out of here. How's that for an opening? James, I'd really like you out of here. In my judgment, both the organization and you would be better off. But please understand, I'm not firing you. I'm leaving that decision completely up to you. And listen carefully, leaders, in all three of those examples, all that happened was we put the responsibility back on the responsible person, the employee. Any reprimand you do should only and ever be in the context of helping someone to succeed, to become the best version of themselves. Tell them that. We're in this room today. It's not about a reprimand. It's about you succeeding and you producing your best results. That's why we're here. I'm here to support you and help you. If I have to write a reprimand, I will. I don't want to, but I'm going to do that. I don't think it's necessary. But right now, this is why we're here, right? I mean, if we're going to develop a team of high performers, we have to be able to encourage them and help them. If they become the wrong person, if those behaviors are habitual and they're chronic, that's a different discussion. Now we got to look at the fact that, listen, we're going to do a termination and do it quick and do it without emotion and do it with compassion, but do it and make it quick. Finally, a couple things here in closing about rewarding people. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to just check the chat window here real quick. And here's a couple questions here. So let me answer one of them right now because it's really about this steadfast resolve that we just talked about. And maybe you already got your answer, but you mentioned having face-to-face with the person ready to give consequences. And yes, you're right. The consequences are the most difficult part. And I just mentioned some of them. Another way, by the way, a quick side note, and this is important, is a great reason to create a PTO package for your staff, because honestly, this is what we did for the one that was having so much trouble with the employment or the working 40 hours issue. Just putting a PTO package in. We're going to offer them more PTO. We're going to reward them with paid time off when they do certain things. But if there's chronic misbehaviors like not calling in the prescribed amount of time and not taking off so many days in a row or taking off too many, we're going to dock your PTO. We're going to take 2, 3, 4 hours off your PTO. There's going to be no discussion. Now, that's a consequence you can put in today. Create the package. But listen, remember that when you're dealing with your staff, it's always something for something, and all too often one side or the other, and this isn't about us versus them, this is a we issue, but all too often we tend to look at this as someone's going to give something, but the other side doesn't have to give anything. That's a false perception. It's always something for something. So do it, make it clear. We want to give you something. We want to reward you for your great behaviors. But in the event, hopefully the unlikely event, that we have chronic misbehavior underperformance, here's what's going to happen. Now, hopefully you don't have to discuss that anymore, folks, team. You know what I mean? That's it. Put it into place. And there's easy ways to put other consequences in as well. All right, great. Real quick, we'll take a look and let's see here if we have anything else on the question list. We're good to go there. I wanted to just share with you a quick reward system. This is called a self-funded reward system. And there we go. Jim Collins said this too, by the way. I'll put this in here, that incentives are not designed to get the right behaviors from the wrong people. So get the right people on board first. But these reward systems need to be performance-based, results-based only. They need to be self-funded. That means an excess of gross profit is usually what I like. You can see it in the illustration here. You have your job costs. On top of that, you sell it and make a gross profit percentage. Hope everybody understands these principles. If you don't, email me and I'll send you a couple documents to help clarify for you and or anybody else in your leadership team that has to do with the numbers. But you have a target gross profit percentage. You should have a target gross profit percentage. By the way, that's the epicenter of your finances. But in the reward system, what we do is we look to create ways where people can produce excess gross profit. That means, say, if your gross profit goal in your kitchen bath design business is 35%, if you hit anything above 35, we're going to create a bonus pool for you. Now, you've already hit your goal in your gross profit in that event, and anything above it, we're going to have a bonus pool for you. My encouragement to you, though, and let me back up one screen, is this. Anything above target, you create a bonus pool, only give away up to 50% of it. You deserve to keep at least 50% of it. And somebody's asking right now in closing, how do we find good people in the first place? Well, you build a team that'll be your advocate, but otherwise, finding people is a skill and an art in today's world. Since we have a minute, I'm gonna stay there. We've got to be creative. When you step into that zone of creative tension that I shared with you at the outset today, that's where you have to live. Listen, the leaders that come up with the most creative solutions to this problem, and there are solutions, solutions like Facebook ads, bulk emails to your most well-connected network, um, other things like offering incentives to your employees, offering incentives to your subs and your vendors to find employees that come on and stay a minimum of 90 days. Other things like benefits. Today's world, there was an article in USA Today recently about companies that are paying off student loans for their employees, and they're attracting great employees by that. Others recently are talking about a 4-day work week. You decide, but develop your set of, listen, here's an action step for you. Write down, develop your set of competitive advantages. What's different about you? Because listen, that's what every prospective employee is asking today when they're applying for a job. Why should I work for you? And if you don't have that crystal clear and you haven't documented and don't have it at the tip of your tongue, chances are you're going to let some great prospects slip through your fingers. But you've got to be the ones that are out there creating and leading. Thank you so much. We're right at stop. And I just want to say again, any documents or any other assistance from legacy business leaders, let me know. We're happy to contribute, and best of success to all of you. Thank you so much.
Fred, I want to thank you again for being part of today's presentation. You did an excellent job. And I want to thank all of you out there for attending today, and have a great day. Thanks so much.